This is an issue of government transparency. We can't trust a government that does not trust its people. We're not bringing little green men or flying saucers into the hearing. We're just going to get to the facts. We're going to uncover the cover-up, and I hope this is just the beginning of many more hearings and more people coming forward about this.
We know that whistleblowers have reported harassment, intimidation, or stigma as well, and this is not acceptable. If people can't report incidents which would have national security or safety implications, then that also has serious consequences for us. As ranking member of this subcommittee, I know my job would be completely impossible if whistleblowers or others feel intimidated to come before this committee. We can't be afraid of asking questions, and we can't be afraid of the truth.
It is unacceptable to continue to gaslight Americans into thinking that this is not happening, or that the potential of intelligent life forms exists other than humans. Even more alarming is the fact that these eyewitnesses are many times service members and have no assurance that their lives will not be negatively impacted or even harmed by their experiences.
We've run into roadblocks from members from the intelligence community, the Pentagon. I proposed legislation to go in the FAA reauthorization that just said if an airline pilot has a sighting, that when he makes that report to the FAA, that it would come to Congress. But I was told that the intelligence community did not like that, and the amendment was not even heard in committee. I think it's time for this country to take back our country. We need to tell the folks at the Pentagon they work for us. Dadgummit, we don't work for them.
You'll hear from people who have had personal sightings rather than Pentagon bureaucrats who have always been sent to stonewall our investigations. Just so that the press knows and the people know, we were even denied access to a classified briefing in a SCIF prior to this hearing due to the amount of hoops that we had to jump through to grant temporary clearance to witness Grusch, who has knowledge of classified information. 3
brave witnesses here. They took an oath. They took an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States, and dadgummit, they're doing it. And we owe them a debt of gratitude.
Today's going to get very weird and out of this world. Gordon and I have just been watching most of, if not all of, the subcommittee hearing that just happened. And while watching that, we had some questions of our own, and we wanted to kind of talk in real time to each other so that you as the audience, as the viewer, as the listener, can also kind of weigh in. And you might be wondering, why the hell would we be talking about this kind of stuff on Simply Walk the Talk? And as promised, previous content, we had mentioned that we wanted to start talking about things that maybe are outside of the realm or the scope of just fitness training or just supplement taking and blood tests and things like that. We want to talk about things that actually affect our lives on a broader scale. And so if we've got things flying around our airspace, it causes me to ask more questions, and it causes me to be even more curious, and it's just a little bit weird. So we want to talk about it, we want to discuss it, and we want you to be a fly on the wall.
My name is Ryan Fobbs Graves, and I'm a former F-18 pilot with a decade of service in the U.S. Navy, including 2 deployments in Operation Enduring Freedom and Operation Inherent Resolve. I have experienced advanced UAP firsthand, and I'm here to voice the concerns of more than 30 commercial aircrew and military veterans who have confided their similar encounters with me.
My name is David Charles Grusch. I was an intelligence officer for 14 years, both in the U.S. Air Force, both active duty, Air National Guard and Reserve, at the rank of major, and most recently from 2021 to 2023, at the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, NGA, at the GS-15 civilian level, which is the military equivalent of a full bird colonel. I was my agency's co-lead in unidentified anomalous phenomena and transmedium object analysis, as well as reporting to the UAP Task Force, UAPTF, and eventually, once it was established, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, AERO.
My name is David Fravor. I'm a retired commander in the United States Navy. In 2004, I was a commanding officer of Strike Fighter Squadron 41, the world-famous Black Aces. We were attached to Carrier Airwing 11, stationed on board the USS Nimitz, and had begun a 2-month workup cycle off the coast of California.
Today, I would like to highlight 3 critical issues that demand our action. As we convene here, UAP are in our airspace, but they are grossly underreported. These sightings are not rare or isolated, they are routine. Military aircrew and commercial pilots, trained observers whose lives depend on accurate identification, are frequently witnessing these phenomena. The stigma attached to UAP is real and powerful and challenges national security. It silences commercial pilots who fear professional repercussions, discourages witnesses, and is only compounded by recent government claims questioning the credibility of eyewitness testimony. Parts of our government are aware of more about UAP than they let on, but excessive classification practices keep crucial information hidden. Since 2021, all UAP videos are classified as secret or above. This level of secrecy not only impedes our understanding, but fuels speculation and mistrust. In 2014, I was an F-18 Foxtrot pilot in the Navy Fighter Attack Squadron 11, the Red Rippers, and I was stationed at NAS Oceana in Virginia Beach. After upgrades were made to our jet's radar systems, we began detecting unknown objects operating in our airspace. At first, we assumed they were radar errors, but soon we began to correlate the radar tracks with multiple onboard sensors, including infrared systems, eventually through visual ID. During a training mission in Warning Area Whiskey 72, 10 miles off the coast of Virginia Beach, 2 F-18 Super Hornets were split by a UAP. The object, described as a dark gray or a black cube inside of a clear sphere, came within 50 feet of the lead aircraft and was estimated to be 5 to 15 feet in diameter. The mission commander terminated the flight immediately and returned base. Our squadron submitted a safety report, but there was no official acknowledgement of the incident and no further mechanism to report the sightings. Soon, these encounters became so frequent that aircrew would discuss the risk of UAP as part of their regular pre-flight briefs. Recognizing the need for action and answers, I founded Americans for Safe Aerospace. The organization has since become a haven for UAP witnesses who were previously unspoken due to the absence of a safe intake process. More than 30 witnesses have come forward, and almost 5,000 Americans have joined us in the fight for transparency at safeaerospace.org. The majority of witnesses are commercial pilots at major airlines. Often, they are veterans with decades of flying experience. Pilots are reporting UAP at altitudes that appear above them at 40,000 feet, potentially in low Earth orbit or in the gray zone below the Kármán line, making inexplainable maneuvers like right-hand turns and retrograde orbits or J-hooks. Sometimes these reports are reoccurring, with numerous recent sightings north of Hawaii and in the North Atlantic. Other veterans are also coming forward to us regarding UAP encounters in our airspace and oceans. The most compelling involve observations of UAP by multiple witnesses and sensor systems. I believe these accounts are only scratching the surface, and more will share their experiences once it is safe to do so. In closing, I recognize the skepticism surrounding this topic. If everyone could see the sensor and video data I witnessed, our national conversation would change. I urge us to put aside stigma and address the security and safety issue this topic represents. If UAP are foreign drones, it is an urgent national security problem. If it is something else, it is an issue for science. In either case, unidentified objects are concerned for flight safety. The American people deserve to know what is happening in our skies. It is long overdue. Thank you.
I became a whistleblower through a PPD-19 urgent concern filing in May 2022 with the Intelligence Community Inspector General. Following concerning reports from multiple esteemed and credentialed current and former military and intelligence community individuals that the U.S. government is operating with secrecy above congressional oversight with regards to UAPs. My testimony is based on information I've been given by individuals with a long-standing track record of legitimacy and service to this country, many of whom also have shared compelling evidence in the form of photography, official documentation, and classified oral testimony to myself and many my various colleagues. I have taken every step I can to corroborate this evidence over a period of 4 years while I was with the UAP Task Force and do my due diligence on the individual sharing it. This is because of these steps, I believe strongly in the importance of bringing this information before you. I am driven by a commitment of both to truth and transparency, rooted in our inherent duty to uphold the United States Constitution and protect the American people. I'm asking Congress to hold our government to this standard and thoroughly investigate these claims. But as I stand here under oath now, I am speaking to the facts as I've been told them. In the U.S. Air Force, in my National Reconnaissance Office, NRO, reservist capacity, I was a member of the UAP Task Force from 2019 to 2021. I served at the NRO Operations Center on the Director's Briefing Staff, which included the coordination of the Presidential Daily Brief and supporting a variety of contingency operations, which I was the Reserve Intelligence Division Chief backup. In 2019, the UAP Task Force Director asked me to identify all special access programs and controlled access programs, also known as SAPs and CAPs, we needed to satisfy our congressionally mandated mission, and we were direct report at the time to the DepSecDef. At the time, due to my extensive executive level intelligence support duties, I was cleared to literally all relevant compartments and in a position of extreme trust, both in my military and civilian capacities. I was informed in the course of my official duties of a multi-decade UAP crash retrieval and reverse engineering program, to which I was denied access to those additional read-ons when I requested it. I made the decision, based on the data I collected, to report this information to my superiors and multiple inspectors general, and in effect becoming a whistleblower. As you know, I've suffered retaliation for my decision, but I am hopeful that my actions will ultimately lead to a positive outcome of increased transparency.
On this day, we were scheduled for a 2v2 air-to-air training with the USS Princeton as our control. When we launched off Nimitz, my wingman was joining up. We were told that the training was going to be suspended and we were going to proceed with real-world tasking. As we proceeded to the west, the air controller was counting down the range to an object that we were going to, and we were unaware of what we were going to see when we arrived. The controller had told us that these objects had been observed for over 2 weeks, coming down from over 80,000 feet, rapidly descending to 20,000 feet, hanging out for hours, and then going straight back up. For those who don't realize, above 80,000 feet is space. We arrived at the location at approximately 20,000 feet in a controller called merge plot, which means that our radar blip was now in the same resolution cell as the contact. As we looked around, we noticed that we saw some whitewater off our right side. It's important to note that the weather on this day was as close to perfect as you could ask for off the coast of San Diego. Clear skies, light winds, calm seas, no whitecaps from waves. So the whitewater stood out in a large blue ocean. All four of us, because we were in F-18Fs, so we had pilots and Wizzo in the back seat, looked down a saw a white tic-tac object with a longitudinal axis pointing north-south and moving very abruptly over the water like a ping pong ball. There were no rotors, no rotor wash, or any sign of visible control surfaces like wings. As we started clockwise towards the object, my Wizzo and I decided to go down and take a closer look with the other aircraft staying in high cover to observe both us and the tic-tac. We proceeded around the circle about 90 degrees from the start of our descent, and the object suddenly shifted its longitudinal axis, aligned it with my aircraft, and began to climb. We continued down another 270 degrees, nose low, where the tic-tac, or we continued 270 degrees toward, and we went nose low to where the tic-tac would have been. Our altitude at this point was about 15,000 feet, and the tic-tac was about 12,000. As we pulled nose onto the object, within about a half mile of it, it rapidly accelerated in front of us and disappeared. Our wingmen, roughly 8,000 feet above us, lost contact also. We immediately turned back to see where the white water was at, and it was gone also. So as we started to turn back towards the east, the controller came up and said, "Sir, you're not going to believe this, but that thing is at your cap point, roughly 60 miles away in less than a minute. You can calculate the speed." We returned to Nimitz. We were taking off our gear. We were talking to one of my crews that was getting ready to launch. We mentioned it to him, and they went out and luckily got the video that you see, that 90-second video. What you don't see is the radar tape that was never released, and we don't know where it's at, of the active jamming that the object put on an APG-73 radar, and I can get into modes later if you're interested. What is shocking to us is that the incident was never investigated. None of my crew were ever questioned. Tapes were never taken, and after a couple days, it turned into a great story with friends. It wasn't until 2009 until Jay Stratton had contacted me to investigate. Unbeknownst to all, he was part of the ATIP program in the Pentagon led by Lou Elizondo. And there was an unofficial report that came out that's now on the internet. Years later, I was contacted by the other pilot, Alex Dietrich, and asked if I'd been contacted, and I said no, but I'm willing to talk. I was contacted by Mr. Elizondo, and we talked for a short period of time, and he said we'd be in contact. A few weeks after that, I was made aware that Lou had left the Pentagon in protest and joined forces with Tom DeLonge, Chris Mellon, Steve Justice, and others to form Two Stars Academy, an organization that pressed the issue with leading industry experts and U.S. government officials. They worked with Leslie Kean, who's present today, Ralph Blumenthal, and Helene Cooper to publish the articles in the New York Times 2017 New York Times, and it removed the stigma on the topic of UFOs, which is why we're here today. Those articles open the door for the government and public that cannot be closed. It has led to an interest from our elected officials who are not focused on little green men, but figuring out where these craft are, where are they from, the technology they possess, how do they operate. It also led to the Whistleblower Protection Act and the NDAA. There are multiple witnesses coming forward to say that have firsthand knowledge, and Mr. Grusch just covered that. What concerns me is that there's no oversight from our elected officials on anything associated with our government processing or working on craft. Believe it, not from this world. This issue is not a full public disclosure that can undermine national security, but it is about ensuring that our system of checks and balances works across all work done in the government using taxpayer funds. Relative to government programs, even unacknowledged wave programs have some level of oversight by the appropriate committee members in the House and Senate, and this work that is said to be occurring from whistleblower testimonies should not be exempt. In closing, I would like to say that the Tic-Tac object we engaged in 2004 was far superior to anything that we had on time, have today, or are looking to develop in the next 10 years. If we in fact have programs that possess this technology, it needs to have oversight from those people that the citizens of this great country elected in office to represent what is best for the United States and best for the citizens. I thank you for your time.
Here we are, Gordon. What's up, man?
How's it going, brother? I'm excited for this one.
I know that you've been interested in extraterrestrials and UFOs and UAPs for quite some time. And so, and I think I didn't know this until you mentioned it. And then I quickly was like, oh yeah, bro, like 3 years ago, I recorded this episode, and I think you listened to that as well. This was before I was doing video, but there was a point in time in which me and a few of my friends out in California and LA, we were studying some of the works of Dr. Stephen Greer, and this was around the time when we were first hearing about David Fravor's report on the Tic-Tac and all these other things, and for a while it was getting out of control. Like everyone was talking about it, but I think the government or the powers that be are really savvy when it comes to putting just enough information out there to make people like me, people like us, look crazy for even mentioning it. And I think that's by design. And so I would love to kind of hear your thoughts, and let's maybe talk about this subcommittee hearing, because the fact that this has now gone to the upper ranks of the government on national TV, I think now should make people think, okay, there's a certain amount of seriousness that has to be felt with all this now. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's changed. There's been a few major catalysts that you touched on there that have allowed it to change incrementally in the psychology of the masses. And I think this is national whenever you touch on something that's such a literally out of this world phenomenon. And I actually came into this entire subject matter skeptical myself. I had just moved to LA. I had come from the world of finance. I was a very reductionist, materialistic type person. And I worked with somebody who just kind of called me out on it of like, well, how do you know there's nothing out there? And I'm like, well, what do you mean? Are you saying you believe in aliens? And he said, yeah, essentially, there's these things called the grays, go look it up. And he was a pretty sharp guy. He was like a graphic designer and just a sharp guy who I was working with. And as a lot of people can kind of attest to this in this sort of community and world, is I sort of went down this rabbit hole of coming into it, having a pretty analytical, strong researcher mind from finance and just looking at businesses and fundamentals and following the money, which is, talk to any investigative journalist, how you really dive into uncovering the truth. And make a very long story short, and still going on to this day, I became, a strong believer that, we are not alone. I leaned into it essentially with my friends, always having these deep philosophical conversations and pushing them on, how do you know for sure? Like, how much have you really researched this? What is really your basis for just, is this off of the sheer size of the universe? Is this based off of what you've researched in military history or money? And we'd always tend to get to a point, though, where they're like, look, man, I think there's a lot of smoke, maybe. I'm with you there. But, show me the alien on the UFO lawn. Show me this, like, total, Hollywood version of how it's done. And I understand that. And I personally, actually, another long story short, had my own personal experience too, but one really profound one using Dr. Greer's method called CE5, using a form of visualized mind's eye type of GPS where you're thinking and using your consciousness and projecting it and seeing yourself from space down in a group, and using a type of meditation and various sensors. And we also had a high power laser that I was using that had an actual craft come over us, low flying, extremely spherical or luminescent in the mountains of Colorado, and powered up 3 times right over top of us. Just incredible, just unequivocally not a satellite. You go down the list, not a drone. This was a legit powerful sighting that we essentially initiated or gave consent to occur, and all felt something too as it occurred, of just like profound awe and love and just connection. I'm like, whoa, like similar to when you have a psychedelic experience and feel this connection with a big greater sense.
When was this, by the way?
This was in when I worked at Gaia Media. I was a production assistant, and how I met Ben, a good friend of ours. And in 2000, this was 17, maybe.
Okay.
18, 17.
I didn't know this about you, which is pretty cool. So you telling me this in real time is pretty outstanding, because I had no idea that you experienced that. Because when I told you about the episode I did with my friends, we used that same technique with the lasers, with the music, with the asking for permission or allowing permission for all these entities to come in. And it didn't turn out nearly as cool as yours did, although we do have some great stories from it.
We had misses too. That's part of it. People think it's like, oh, these people always, no, we definitely, we tried a few times or a bunch where it didn't work, but we enjoyed the experience and had some other strange phenomenon. But I think there's a multiple variables, and we really try to think, well, what were the variables that night that made it align? But there's a lot of strong variables. So yeah, and I definitely, I don't want to keep the crowd waiting, because I'm a huge fan. And today, I already fanboyed and watched it at 10 a.m. And as Josh pointed out, he actually is going to see some firsthand reactions for them now. They're getting into the questions when the witnesses. It's a big deal. I think within the UFO community, getting this on record is a huge deal. Getting this on congressional record with a sworn-in witness is a big deal and means a lot, historically speaking. And I have a lot of people who are not in this space who've now really come around, or this has gotten them much more, shall we say, in the camp of this is maybe more true than not, essentially. So we'll go through now. They're going to start kind of, I wouldn't say grilling. This was actually really well done. It was very bipartisan. It was very respectful for the witnesses. And as most of the senators you'll see at the end, we'll show some of their closing statements. Probably the most respectful bipartisan hearing up to this point in Congress, which is such a good sign.
And I think we should also preface, before you start playing some of this, is how we've gotten to this point. So, people are going to hear different terminologies and acronyms. The reason why, or at least one of the reasons why, you don't hear the words UFO anymore, or the acronym UFO, is because people automatically assume that means aliens. And that, I think, has been used as a weapon to cause people to think, oh, this is hogwash, this is BS, this is stuff we've heard all along, right?
Yeah.
And so to call something a UAP, I think it technically means unidentified amalgalous. Is that right? Amalgalous.
I think they say unidentified aerial phenomenon.
And another word they use is like,
but they sometimes say anomalous as well.
Anomalous.
These are anomalous vehicles.
Right. So unidentified anomalous. And then I know, again, I haven't watched all. I've only watched half of the subcommittee hearing, but I know that there were some concerns on the verbiage used in the documents that have been coming out. So the difference between non-human and extraterrestrial and all these things I know is important. And so, whether that was discussed or not, I don't know. And also, there was a lot of pressure on the government to get to this point. So for lots of years, many people who are top like airline pilots and military pilots and people who have been vetted through and through have been ostracized simply because they spoke out. And now there's enough information that came together to get this to be on a national stage with the subcommittee hearing. So I think this is a really good start to your point. And let's go through it.
This is the start of the conversation. I think that's an important thing to keep in mind, especially if you're already sort of in the UFO camp. There's sort of the UFO camp, and then there's sort of the broader masses camp. And I think this is a major step, especially for the broader masses camp. The UFO camp wants to see already, stuff that they think is totally going on with craft and vehicles and corruption and suppression of technology. There's a lot of levels to this. Keep that in mind. But remember, this is the beginning of a conversation. It's in the right direction, and we just need to continue putting positive pressure on these various lawmakers and others to give them the supports and continue the conversation.
What steps do you think have to be taken to improve pilots' UAP reporting, be it military or commercial?
Right now, we need a system where pilots can report without fear of losing their jobs. There's a fear that the stigma associated with this topic is going to lead to professional repercussions, either through management or perhaps through their yearly physical check. So having a secure system, reducing the stigma, and making this information available through the public is going to reduce the concerns that aircrew have.
Could you just give me a little idea of the degree to which reports in the past are not made public right now?
Well, I don't think there has been a proper reporting system to gather those reports and thus not report them. So to answer your question, I think there is a dearth of data due to the fact that the reporting has been limited up to this time.
Could you tell me why you believe it's, kind of play the devil's advocate, a reason why some of this stuff should not be available to the public?
There's certainly some national security concerns when we use our advanced sensors in our tactical jets to be able to identify these objects. However, there's no reason that the objects themselves would be classified. I would be curious to see how the security classification guideline actually spells out the different nuances of how this topic is classified from the perspective of UAP, not national security.
I'll give you a follow-up on that. Assuming that there are reasons why not all this should be made public, this has been around for a long period of time. Can any of the three of you think of any reason why anything related to UAPs, say 15 years and back, should not be immediately made public?
Good question.
I think one of it is acknowledging a vulnerability, both from a collection and I'll just say a countermeasure perspective. So it's that we haven't cracked for many years. Yeah.
Even say 20 years back. Is there any reason why when you go back that far things shouldn't be made public?
Unless it shows a specific national security vulnerability as it relates to a weakness in a particular defense system.
Okay, Mr. Fravor, the TikTok incident that you were engaged occurred in 2004. What kind of reporting took place after that incident?
Okay, hold that for a
We
second.
had a standard debrief.
So up to this point, I think it's already interesting, right? Because you've got three witnesses of certain phenomenon who have been sworn in, who all are having to be very careful what they say. And I think that is worth mentioning simply because you can just almost feel the sensitivity in which they're having to carry out, because even to this day, even though they've been sworn in, they still have to be very careful because, they don't want to be seen as crazy. They don't want to be seen as wackos. Yet they've seen some things. And the question that was asked is actually a very valid question, which is, well, why wouldn't we? Why shouldn't the public be alerted to things that have happened 15 or 20 years ago. And I think this is what we're going to get to the bottom of, because yes, there are certain national security risks, but when you can lump anything that doesn't need to be shown, quote unquote, shown to the public, if you can label that as top security or national security risk, then that's a very easy way to kind of sweep things under the rug without implication, right? And so that's what caused me to kind of go, all right, even these guys who are now out in the open, they still have to be very careful in what they say.
Yeah, there's, and they'll get into this, so I won't. I'll let them, speak firsthand. But a big issue is overclassification of things, where they make they make documents national security when really it's, for instance, Commander Fravor says one of his buddies just took iPhone footage of these things from the ship or either on his craft, and they just immediately made it TTSI, like the highest level of security clearance. So it's part of a weapon, as they call it, I believe, weaponization of classification, essentially. You're over classifying it because there is a level of control and power to this that they feel entitled to, essentially, a big part of this.
Right.
Can any of the three of you think of any reason why anything related to UAPs, say 15 years and back, should not be immediately made public?
I think one of it is acknowledging a vulnerability, both from a collection and I'll just say a countermeasure perspective. So it's now we haven't cracked for many years. Yeah.
Even say 20 years back. Is there any reason why when you go back that far, things shouldn't be made public?
Unless it shows a specific national security vulnerability as it relates to a weakness in a particular defense system.
Okay, Mr. Fravor, the TikTok incident that you were engaged occurred in 2004. What kind of reporting took place after that incident?
None. We had a standard debrief where the backseaters went down to our carrier intel center and briefed what had happened, and that was it. No one else talked to us, and I was in the top 20 in the battle group. No one came. The captain was aware, admiral was aware, nothing was done.
Did your commanding officers provide any sort of justification?
No, because I was a commanding officer of the squadron, so no.
Was this incident the only UAP event that you encountered while you were a pilot?
Yes, it was.
Okay. This is for any one of you. Based off of each of your experiences and observations, do you believe UAPs pose a potential threat to our national security?
Yes, and here's why. The technology that we faced was far superior than anything that we had. And you could put that anywhere. If you had one, you captured one, you reverse engineered it, you got it to work, you're talking something that can go into space, go someplace, drop down in a matter of seconds, do whatever it wants, and leave, and there's nothing we can do about it. Nothing.
Okay. You two?
I would also like to add, from a commercial aviation and military aviation perspective, we deal with uncertainty in our operating space as a matter of our professional actions. Identifying friend from foe is very important to us. And so when we have unidentified targets and we continue to ignore those due to a stigma or fear of what it could be, that's an opening that our adversaries can take advantage of.
What steps should be taken to better understand and respond to UAP encounters in the interest of national security?
There needs to be a location where this information is centralized for processing, and there needs to be a two-way communication loop so the operators on the front end have a feedback and can get best practices on how to process information, what to do, and to ensure that their reporting is being listened to. Right now, there's not a lot of back and forth.
Mr. Grusch, in your complaint to the Intelligence Community Inspector General, you claim that you believe information is being hidden. What kind of information do you think was hidden, and do you think it should remain hidden?
Yes, I can speak to that very briefly in an unclassified manner, as the preponderance of my complaint was classified in the intelligence communities. Both material acquisition and exploitation activity, also baselining the UAPs, but not sharing it with the intelligence professionals that are actually doing step briefs to pilots, that kind of information. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we'll go to Mr. Garcia.
Thank you. Again, thank you all for your service and for testifying today. I want to just talk about the UAPs as it relates to what we're seeing with pilots' interaction with UAPs. Particularly, Mr. Graves, one of the concerns for members of this committee is this idea that pilots, there's no system to actually report UAPs and the stigma around pilots. And so can you just briefly, you mentioned that you're working with 30 pilots right now that have had encounters with UAPs, but you've also, I believe, discussed and know of many more pilots. This is just those that you're currently working with. Is that correct? Can you expand on that?
Certainly. I'll break that down in two ways. First, when we were first experiencing these objects off the eastern seaboard in the 2014 to 2015 time period, anyone that had upgraded their radar systems were seeing these objects. So there was a large number of my colleagues that were detecting these objects off the eastern seaboard. They were further correlating that information with the other onboard sensors, and many of them also had their own eye sightings as well of these objects. Now, that was our personal first-hand experience at the time. Since then, as I've engaged this topic, others have reached out to me to share their experiences, both on the military side as well as the commercial aviation side. On the military aviation side, veterans that have recently got out have shared their stories and have expressed how the objects we were seeing in 2014, 2015 continued all the way to 2019, 2020, and beyond. And so it became a generational issue for naval aviators on the eastern seaboard. This was something we were briefing to new students. This is something that was included in a notice to airmen to ensure that there was no accidents. And now with commercial aviators, they're reaching out because they're having somewhat similar experiences as our military brothers and sisters, but they do not have any reporting system that they can send us to.
And let me just add, and both to Mr. Fravor as well as Mr. Graves, not having the system for reporting, would you both agree that it's harmful to not just our national security interests, but to understand this phenomenon of what's happening with UAPs?
I think it's it's actually, it's a travesty that we don't have a system to correlate this and actually investigate. So if you took the East Coast, there's coastal radars out there that monitor our air defense identification zone, so out to 200 miles. They can track these, so when you see them, they can actually go and pull that data and get maneuvering. And instead of just having the airplanes, there's other data sources out there. And I've talked to other government officials on this. So you need a centrally located repository that these reports go to. So if you just stuck it in DOD, you wouldn't get anything out of the Intelligence Committee because they have a tendency not to talk. But if you had a central location where these reports are coming in, not just military, but also commercial aviation, because there's a lot of that going on, especially if you talk to anyone that flies from here to Hawaii over the Pacific, they see odd lights. So I think you need to develop something that allows you a central point to collect the data in order to investigate.
Mr. Graves?
I would concur with everything Mr. Fravor said. I'll continue to say that the commercial pilots that have reached out to me through American for Safe Aerospace are doing so because they don't feel there's another way for them to report this safety issue.
And I think one of the clear outcomes of this hearing already is that there has to be a safe and transparent reporting process for pilots, both on the commercial side and the military side, to be able to report UAPs in a way that's also transparent, but also understands the scope of our national security interests and what may be classified or not. But I think there has to be some sort of system. And so that's something that I hope can be an outcome that this committee can work on. Is there anything else for just the two of you briefly beyond the reporting system that you think that we can do as a government to encourage and facilitate more civilian reporting?
We're doing it right now.
Okay,
I
great.
think this hearing is going to show the American people that their government takes this topic seriously.
And how about civilians that may not be pilots? What kind of process could be in place for civilians who are not pilots, who may have UAP encounters? Do either of you have any suggestions that could facilitate that?
My recommendations would be to make that a sensor-centric operation in order to make it as objective as possible.
Okay. Sir, Mr. Fravor?
I agree with Mr. Graves on that.
Okay. Just briefly, I also just want to note, particularly for the two pilots and the question from Mr. Grusch, one of the things I found fascinating in our discussion with Mr. Graves last night as well is that you both described UAPs and formations and the way they are observed in space or in our air, and the way that they move is essentially ways in which current technology or aircraft that we know of are unable to actually function or move. And so will you just, for the public record, again, once again, briefly either describe or note that aircraft that we witnessed, particularly by the 30 folks that you're working with, are essentially outside the scope of anything that we know of today, the technology we have today. Mr. Graves, Mr. Fravor?
Yes, the objects that are being seen by commercial pilots are performing maneuvers that are unexplainable due to our current understanding of our technology and our capabilities as a country, and that applies for the military as well.
Mr. Fravor?
Yeah, I concur with that. We have nothing that can stop in midair and go the other direction, nor do we have anything that can, like in our situation, come down from space, hang out for 3 hours, and go back up.
Thank you. My last question, and sometimes I know you have also said some of these answers in the past, but we're trying to get them on the public record as well, which is really important. Mr. Grusch, finally, do you believe that our government is in possession of UAPs?
Absolutely, based on interviewing over 40 witnesses over 4 years.
And where?
I know the exact locations, and those locations were provided to the Inspector General and some of which to the intelligence committees. I actually had the people with the firsthand knowledge provide protected disclosure to the Inspector General.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, I would just say that I think that these questions are important questions, and I look forward to being involved in the process to get those answered. I know there'll be a lot of questions from the committee members, so I yield back.
Thank you. We'll go to Mr. Burchett himself.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Garcia. I would like to have you on my legislation to do just that on the recording. And we'll get together on that. We might do a sponsor on that. That'd be really cool. Thank you. Really great questions.
Yeah.
Mr. Graves, again, I'd like to know, how do you know that these were not our aircraft?
Some of the behaviors that we saw in a working area, we would see these objects being at 0.0 Mach, that's zero airspeed, over certain pieces of the ground. So what that means, just like a river, if you throw a bobber in, it's going to float downstream. These objects were staying completely stationary in Category 4 hurricane winds. These same objects would then accelerate to supersonic speeds, 1.1, 1.2 Mach, and they would do so in very erratic and quick behaviors that I don't have an explanation for.
Okay. Have you spoken to commercial and military pilots that have seen these off of our East Coast?
I have.
Okay. Mr. Fravor, I noticed that in the Tic Tac video, it's Tic Tac like the candy, not TikTok like the Chinese Communist app. That's right. Yes, sir. So I'll make that because my daughter corrected me on that and called me a boomer and said, "Hey, boomer," and I said, "No, baby, it's Tic Tac like the candy. You're gonna have to just look it up." And but I would also like to say today is a day of many firsts. It's a miracle that we're having this meeting, and it's also a miracle that my wife has put up with me for 9 years today. Today is my anniversary, so I want to tell my wife happy anniversary and that I love her very much.
Come on, bro.
She wants to say it's 9 years, that's 2 years of her life.
This is gonna be historical. He
Thank
slipped
you.
that in.
Mr. Fravor, what astonished you the most about the flight capabilities of these Tic Tac, very briefly?
The performance. Absolute performance. It was.
And you're not aware of any other objects that anybody in the world has, in this world, that has those capabilities?
No, I think it's far beyond actually our material science that we currently possess.
Are you aware of any other reconnaissance platforms that have tracked or recorded the Tic Tac maneuvers, maybe the NORAD system or any of the others?
I am not.
Okay. Mr. Grusch, thank you for being here, brother. Thank you all very much. Have you faced any retaliation or reprisals for any of your testimony or anything on these lines?
Yeah, I have to be careful what I say in detail because there is an open whistleblower reprisal investigation on my behalf. I don't want to compromise that investigation by providing anything that may help provide somebody information. But it was very brutal and very unfortunate, some of the tactics they used to hurt me both professionally and personally, to be quite frank. Yeah.
It's very unfortunate. As they say, when you're over the target, that's when they do the most firing at you. Do you have any personal knowledge of people who have been harmed or injured in efforts to cover up or conceal these extraterrestrial technology?
Yes.
Personally.
Period.
Anyone been murdered that you would think that you know of or have heard of? I guess
I have to be careful asking that question. I directed people with that knowledge to the appropriate authorities.
maybe in a if we could get in a confidential area SCIF, we could talk about that. But unfortunately, we were denied access to the SCIF. and that's very unfortunate in this scenario. Mr. Fravor, do you believe that you witnessed an additional object under the water in relation to your encounter?
I will say we did not see an object. There was something there to cause the whitewater, and when we turned around, it was gone. So there was something there that obviously moved.
Okay, it was not the same object though that you were looking at, correct?
No, we actually joked that the Tic Tac was communicating with something when we came back, and because the whitewater disappeared.
We were in another instance. We're told about the capabilities of a jamming during viewing of when there were some people chasing some of these objects. Did you experience any of that jamming or?
Which he has said before in many previous interviews, including the New York Times article, that when you jam a radar, especially of a military vessel, that is an act of war. And they were in, I believe, international waters, but especially if they're in our boundary. But he has said this would have been considered an act of war. So also take that into account when they talk about this jamming. Right.
And also to your point, we're talking about military pilots which if you can imagine that the US government, the US military is working on some kind of new technology, they would at least alert the commander, right? Like David Fravor.
He's the commander. He was
right?
the commander, right?
Like
I mean,
you would
yeah,
think
I know.
you would think they would alert him to say, hey, you might see some stuff. Don't say anything to everybody else, but like just disregard working on some new stuff. And counter to what we're agreeing with, Gordon, there's obviously nowadays there's this prevalence of drone systems. We know that drones are advancing at Mach speed, right? Like it's advancing. The technology of drones have gone out of this world, and you can now see these drones that come together to make these like very cool light shows and make these very cool synergistic movements and things like that. But when you're talking about the things that they're talking about, it requires immense amount of power and immense amount of to be able to see some of the things that they witnessed. It would be hard to just explain that away with saying that this is modern drone technology. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
And if there's anybody who would know, it's a guy who's living it is to identify objects for his own safety and because he's been trained. I can go through all the reasons, but that is the expert you'd probably want to say, oh, that's a drone. That like they do that and they know the difference between a military drone. I don't care what type of drone it is. And once again, these are then drones that have the ability to stay out over the ocean for extended periods of time, staying in one spot without moving with, high speed winds, and then also having the ability to jam their radar. I mean, do all the things they've mentioned. That it's just the one other thing you could argue is it's a military grade drone that has the ability to jam radar, but when they describe when they're close to it and they describe the speeds at which it's going, that's where all those arguments fall flat for me. And so it's like I said, I started off a skeptic, and those are valid rational questions, and we don't want to be dismissive, but you have to also give ground when it's like, okay, that's not holding weight empirically based off experts.
Right. And I will say this, the idea of no data does not prove anything one way or the other. And the prevalence of data doesn't necessarily prove one thing or the other. To me, it reminds me of the idea of having data on love, right? There is no data for love, right? We know what love feels like. Even the idea of having faith, like we know what faith is. We know what love is. We've maybe felt it before, or maybe we have some idea of what it feels like, but you can't go to a scientist and say, is this love or is this not love based on data, right? And so I like to throw that into the pot for people who are watching this and listening to this. It's like what we're hearing is the most that we can come up with in terms of data.
Right. What's quantifiable.
Right.
Yeah, and there's going to be certain things that are qualitative, or what I think philosophy calls qualia, the smell of rose, the sensation of love. There's these things that are unquantifiable for some people, the experience of source, God, whatever you want to call it. But these beings are operating on some levels where, at the very least, they might help us have some very profound, strong answers to those type of ontological questions. And so that's a part of all of this that I think is underlying all of this too is, fear of the unknown, but also maybe fear of knowing what we have considered to be something we thought was unknowable.
Right. And I only bring that up for those that are at this point right now who go, okay, yeah, well, And I don't know why I'm talking like that because they don't talk like that, but
The hater's voice.
right, the hater's voice, right, which is the person that goes, well, with modern day technology, with our phones being everywhere and video, video surveillance
Yeah,
being
where's the
everywhere,
evidence,
why
bro?
don't we have like
4K
evidence of
video.
right, like
Yeah,
why don't we have
yeah.
better video? Why don't we have this and that? And it's like, have you ever tried to video like a hummingbird in mid-flight, or have you ever tried to identify something? And also, let's not forget that if these unidentified aerial phenomenon don't want to be captured on video, you don't think that they have enough sophisticated technology to be cloned or cloaked, right? Like they could cloak their own vision, I would imagine.
There's multiple strong, I'd say empirical arguments that have been backed up to that, and I think that's a valid. But I hear that's the first question or skeptical question is, where's the evidence? And they'll get into a lot of this, just for the audience too, setting this up. They'll get into this, and I think Josh and I touched on this before maybe. But the bottom line is, if a lot of that footage, that is the 4K, the unequivocal mic drop evidence, is being classified national security and being held by these same corrupt forces within these special access programs, right? So it's not that the evidence does not exist, it's that the access is not given to the evidence. And then it allows them to have psychological operations for, front facing the public of, oh, well, this is, there's many ways you can manipulate this when you control all the pieces. And that's essentially what's going on. Is this needs about transparency. Once again, people, these are our taxpayer dollars. These people work for us. Ultimately, it doesn't matter if you're the, NRO or CIA or whatever agency involved in this. Special access programs demand oversight, even if it's within compartmentalized Senate and House committees. Those programs still have oversight. It's part of the checks and balances of our entire system and constitution. And the second you start lacking that accountability, the second the entire system degrades, and you have forces that are above the constitution and above the human people, and ultimately, unfortunately, end up creating a sort of resentment and elitism towards their own views and ways of operation that feels that they don't need to answer to us, and they actually revert this whole idea of, oh wait, of the people for the people, wait, what's happened here, right? So keep that in mind here. And this is, you just got to call a spade like it is as well. I'm not just trying to speculate here. This is based on grounded things. You'll hear more and more coming out about this as well.
Your radar or weapon system.
My crew that launched after we landed experienced significant jamming to the APG-73 radar, which was what we had on board, which is a mechanically scanned, very high-end system prior to the APG-79. And yes, it did pretty much everything you could do, range, velocity, aspect, and then it hit the lock, and the targeting pod is passive. That's what we were able to get the video on.
I'm about to run out of time, but are you aware of any of our enemies that have that capability?
No.
Okay, I would also like to note for the record that, like George Knapp, breaking Area 51, he's the reason I know about that. And the reason I know about the Tic Tacs is Leslie Keene from New York Times article, and I would encourage everybody to read that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You'll back to you for no time.
Very good. Mr. Raskin?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Graves, you reported UAP encounters during training flights, I think, and have since come forward to warn the Pentagon that these encounters may be putting pilots at risk.
I could not take this guy seriously the whole time.
Oh my goodness.
And I'm trying to understand the angle. I was trying to, but I just.
But it's tactics like that I think make this like on another level. But anyway, nonetheless,
He keeps it real. He's keeping it real, even in Congress. All right.
My first question is, you've identified these as taking place on the East Coast. Is it just on the East Coast where these encounters have been reported?
No, since the events initially occurred, I've learned that the objects have been detected essentially where all operations, Navy operations are being conducted across the world. And that's from the Ultimate Anomaly Resolutions Office reporting.
All right, can you describe your experience after you decided to come forward and go public with your experience?
Certainly. Like many others, in 2017, I saw the New York Times article come out as well. And for me, it was special because I recognized the voices on the video. I recognized the video itself. I had seen it when it was taken. I'd seen it when it was debriefed. And so that was kind of shook me because I realized that this problem was still ongoing. And so I reached out to colleagues back on the East Coast and realized that this was still a safety risk that they were dealing with, that they had essentially hit a wall with how they could move forward on this conversation. It was at that point when I decided to try to move the conversation forward myself.
Are there common characteristics to the UAPs that have been cited by different pilots, and can you describe what the convergence of descriptions is?
Certainly. We were primarily seeing dark gray or black cubes inside of a clear sphere.
I'm sorry, dark gray or black cubes?
Yes, inside of a clear sphere.
And you'll hear, you'll hear him say that multiple times. And I think the closest depiction, honestly, is if you haven't, I recommend seeing the movie Nope. I believe it's Keenan Michael Peele, the director of Get Out and a bunch of those other great films. But he did a movie called Nope.
Key.
Michael, yeah. He did the movie Nope, and it's all about a yeah, won't get. I don't want to spoil it, but it involves essentially an extraterrestrial type entity. But whatever, I'm gonna spoil this a little here then for you, but go watch it here. The end of it, he shows the actual. It's an actual kind of what they call essentially a predator, kind of like we have predators on the planet, but a space predator, and it can cloak like a cloud, and various things. But it looks at one point, and it gets really close, and it looks similar to how they're describing a sphere inside of a cube, or a cube inside of a sphere. And we won't get into too many things, but there's a lot of theories of what exactly the sphere is. A lot of people believe it's some sort of, anti-gravitic, shielding that allows it to move and not be affected by the various factors in this, dimension. And another component that's kind of heady that they get into a little is the idea of fourth dimensions in three-dimensional spaces and how that's depicted. Carl Sagan's famous for, and I might put a clip of this here, showing a cube, the shadow of a cube, and the shadow it makes is essentially how a fourth-dimensional object would appear in 3 dimensions. So this is also what people we think might be seeing is 4-dimensional craft, and that's why they're described by Graves as non-human intelligence, because he wants us to encapsulate also not only extraterrestrial, the common, what we'd see from another planet, but also extra-dimensional beings. So if you're an extra-dimensional, fourth-dimensional being appearing in 3 dimension to us, then your craft and various things might appear that way. And that also then would lead us to assume they have clearly access to 4 dimensions. Well, when we only have 3. So
I was thinking he said pube, like pubic hair.
Yes, that's what he said. Yes.
Right. Okay. I'm like, wait.
Excuse
what?
me. Did you say
pube?
Oh, we're getting harassed, but oh damn. They're right. Yeah. So it's really sorry. It's getting heady. Is you think then a more advanced species has also more access to more dimensions, and we've already theorized that there could be up to 12 dimensions with current multiverse string theory. So this is. Like I said, this subject, I love it because there's so many layers and it's going to affect everything. But that's my personal take on why they look the way they do. I think these beings are also extra dimensional and therefore look that way to a 3rd-dimensional thing. And if you watch shows like Skinwalker, Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, and Beyond Skinwalker, and these shows where they're really doing a lot of in research into this, that would also then correlate with what they're finding, which is essentially wormhole-like or portal-like structures on this craft or on this property that are anomalous, and they're able to actually measure through various heavy-duty scientific experiments and instruments. And these beings then, it would make sense, would also have the ability to traverse portals. And that also would then correlate with the idea that how are they getting here? If it's light years away, even if it's 100 or 1,000 light years away, that's still based on our current going at the speed of light. That would still take a very long time. So they have the ability then to basically quantum entangle or jump in and out of points in space and time and appear instantaneously in other dimensions. So they're going to get into this. Greer, talking about what is the tech, but it's exciting stuff because people can obviously then lead to what the implications of this mean for us in the next coming years if we really start to get this unlocked.
The apex or tips of the cube were touching the inside of that sphere, and that was primarily what was being reported when we were able to gain a visual tally of these objects. And that occurred over almost 8 years, and as far as I know, it's still occurring.
So I take it that you're arguing what we need is real transparency in a reporting system so we can get some clarity on what's going on out there, because there are many pilots in your situation, but we should have a way of developing a systematic inventory of all of such encounters. Is that right?
Yes, and I think we need both transparency and the reporting. We have the reporting, but we need to make sure that information can be promulgated to commercial aviation as well as the rest of the populace.
Mr. Grusch, what about you? What was your experience after you came forward?
Well, it's only been about 2 months or so I guess my experience has been overwhelming support from former colleagues of mine that have privately messaged me, and I do appreciate that. But I do have knowledge of active planned reprisal activity against myself and other colleagues, and it's very, very upsetting to me.
Coming from where?
Certain senior leadership at previous agencies I was associated with. And that's all I'll say publicly, but I can provide more details in a closed environment.
Okay. Well, I hope you understand that there would be bipartisan rejection of any attempt to vilify, demonize, or engage in other reprisals against our witnesses and people who are telling the truth from their perspective.
Yeah, there were certain colleagues of mine that were brutally administratively attacked, and it actually makes me very upset as a leader to see that happen to other coworkers and actually superiors of mine over the last 3 years.
How do you account for that response? That seems like a bizarre response.
I call it administrative terrorism. That's their quiver, their tool in the toolbox to silence people, especially the career government service cares about their career, cares about their clearance, their reputation to climb the ladder, and when you threaten that career path, a lot of people back off. But I'm here to represent those people. So
Respect. Administrative terrorism.
Mr. Fravor, what about you? What has your experience been since you've come forward with your perspective on this?
Actually, I've been treated very well. And the 6 people that were involved, myself included, all of them have or will be retiring from the military as 05s or 06s. And all my friends that are very senior, 3 and 4 stars, I've talked to them. They believe, they understand there's a problem, but no, I was actually treated really well.
And what is your general interpretation of these phenomena, or what is your current thinking of trying to make sense of them?
Well, I'll say, I'm not like a UFO fanatic. It's not me. But I will tell you that what we saw with 4 sets of eyes over a 5-minute period, still, we have nothing close to it. It was amazing to see. I told my buddy I wanted to fly it, but yeah, it's just an incredible technology.
I want to fight, I think.
All right, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I'll go back to you.
Roger, wing that.
Thanks. On to Ms. Luna.
Mr. Grusch, in speaking to you
She's been great. She's
yesterday,
one of the leading
I just wanted to
performers.
follow up on Representative Raskin's questions. In the last couple of years, have you had incidences that have caused you to be in fear for your life for addressing these issues?
yes, personally.
I just want everyone to note that he's coming forward in fear of his life. To put in perspective, if they were really not scared about this information coming out, why would someone be intimidated like that? To your knowledge, are NHIs working with adversarial foreign governments in either technology exchange programs or back engineering programs?
I don't have data on that. I'm not sure.
Have you heard or you had people come forward to present that evidence?
Not that particular evidence that you just espoused.
Okay, on the 19th of April, Dr. Kirkpatrick, head of AERO, had said that he did not find any evidence of UAPs. You also stated that you had, in your interview, that you had briefed him on information that you were uncovering, but that he did not follow up with you. Were the items that you divulged to him pertinent to national security?
Yes, him and I had a classified conversation in April 2022 before he took over AERO in July 2022, and I provided him some concerns I had.
Do you know why he might not have followed up with you?
Because he was lying.
I unfortunately cannot.
Yeah, bottom line is, guys, you're gonna have to read through a little bit of the, read in between the lines for a good chunk of what Grusch says, and he's gonna have to get into a SCIF, as we said, for classified stuff. But in a lot of intelligence and military circles, you talk to anybody in those fields, when you say, it's a need to know, or I can neither confirm nor deny. When he says no to things, he usually says no. So when it's a yes to a classified thing, he says, I'm sorry, I have to get into a classified. But that's, you can deduce pretty strongly that means it's a yes, but it's classified currently.
Exactly.
That's essentially what he's saying. So, it's just, you got to use some read between the line glasses on these.
And for the record, Luna is kind of hot. Anyway.
She's crushing the game. She's got a Marvel movie in the making.
His mind. I wish he did. I was happy to give sage counsel to him on where to look when he took the helm of AERO.
Okay, and then my last question for you before I move to Mr. Graves is you received prior approval from the Defense Department to speak on certain issues, correct?
Correct, through DOPSR, DoD Pre-Publication and Security Review, and I just want to remind the public, they're just looking from a security perspective. These are my own personal views and opinions, not the department's.
Okay, I'm asking that though mainly because I think that there are many people that would like to discredit you, so it does bring a certain amount of credibility to your testimony.
I'm required by law to do that as a former intelligence officer, or I go to jail for revealing classified information.
Yeah, we don't want you to go to jail.
That's a key point. What I keep talking about is a key point. He is doing this by the book with the way he is declassifying and coming out and giving his testimony. He is doing this by the book because it's a very, very fine line he has to walk by forces that are extremely upset with him even saying what he said clearly, and that he will be imprisoned and have the Espionage Act and various things thrown at him if he says one thing that is classified essentially.
And that's what I was touching on at the very beginning of all of this, is just watch how careful everyone has to be. That doesn't alarm you, or doesn't at least make you a little bit more curious? Because what we're doing here, essentially, you and I, Gordon, is we're trying to read between the lines of perception based on our knowledge or lack of knowledge, which should represent the world, the society in which we're either being duped or now it's being exposed a little bit in a way. And so I like you said, rightly so, this is the beginning of a lot more that should be coming out, because now people are going to be like, wait a minute, what, when is this going to be unclassified, and why was it classified? And I think it's going to put pressure on the government. So this is good.
Yeah, it's becoming harder and harder for the skeptics or the manipulative psychological operations to work, because the preponderance of evidence is becoming so overwhelming, and the jury, the ball is in their court to disprove more and more, to where, like I said, even people who initially used to be skeptical are now, I have so many friends who are like, okay, now this is getting really overwhelming. And, so that's why it's exciting. This is history in a lot of ways. And it's, once again, they're sworn oaths, guys. They will go to jail if they're lying, right? So keep that in mind. These guys, taking a big risk if they're lying, and this is all BS.
My next question would actually be for Mr. Graves. Can you please explain to me in detail the event that occurred at Vandenberg Air Force Base?
Certainly. In the 2003 timeframe, a large group of Boeing contractors were operating near one of the launch facilities at Vandenberg Air Force Base when they observed a very large 100-yard sided red square approach the base from the ocean and hover at low altitude over one of the launch facilities. This object remained for about 45 seconds or so before darting off over the mountains. There was a similar event within 24 hours later in the evening. This was a morning event, I believe 8:45 in the morning. Later in the evening, post-sunset, there were reports of other sightings on base, including some aggressive behaviors. These objects were approaching some of the security guards at rapid speeds before darting off. And this is information that was received through one of the witnesses that had approached me at Americans for Safe Aerospace.
Was this documented in any official form, whether it was a police blotter?
Yes, they had official documentation and records from the event that the witness held over the years.
And I'm not going to ask you to do it right now for time reasons, but you'd be able to sketch what was witnessed, correct? And have you seen that before on any other equipment and or during your flight time?
I have not seen what they've described. This object was estimated to be almost the size of a football field, and I have not seen anything personally that large.
Okay, and then another question on follow-up, referencing the gimbal video go fast incident. Can you just clarify, because to our understanding, the footage was actually cut off at a certain point, but what happens at the end of that video, just for those Americans specifically that are wanting to know about the rest of that footage?
Certainly. There was some uncertainty or instability with the object. It seemed to rock a bit, and that's the last I had seen of the video. Much of the data that I would recommend be analyzed would consist of radar data that would provide precise kinematics on the object, as well as the fleet of objects that were operating nearby.
Okay, and follow-up, in regards to the reporting procedures that Mr. Garcia had addressed on, as well as Representative Burchett, with the FAA, to your understanding, pilots that are seeing this, commercial airline pilots, are they receiving cease and desist letters from corporations for coming forward with information in regards to safety for potential airline passengers?
I have been made privy to conversations with commercial aviators who have received cease and desist orders.
So the American public should know that corporations are putting their own reputations on the not the line, but ahead of the safety of the American people. And I think, would you agree with that statement?
It appears so.
Okay. And I guess this would be my last. I'm out of time. I yield. I'll be back.
Good.
I'll be back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, let's talk about the laws of physics for a second. Mr. Graves and Commander Fravor, I heard you talk about speed.
Okay, bro.
When those objects broke the sound barrier.
He looks like an alien.
I know he's
That was in a jet. You can't hear anything. It's kind of loud in there.
Oh, there's
Yeah, you're not able to actually
Homeboy.
personally tell.
yeah, that's our man Jeremy Corbell.
Jerry
and-
Corbell and George Knapp.
and Borgie. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
And then General, I believe to his left, General. It's General Lincoln's last name.
Well, I will say the objects that we were seeing, they were spherical, and they were observed up to Mach 2, which is a very non-aerodynamic shape.
What about G-forces? Let's talk about G-forces of those vehicles. Could a human survive those G-forces with known technology today?
No.
No, not for the acceleration rates that we observed.
Okay. What about what they look like? How close did you get? Did you see a seam or a rivet or a section? And what I mean is, obviously, the
They look
jets you're
like you,
flying have
sir.
all those things. These objects have those.
I didn't have the detail to be able to tell that.
So we got within a half mile of Tic Tac, which people say that's pretty far, but in airplanes that's actually relatively close. No, it was perfectly white, smooth, no windows. Although when we did take the original FLIR video that is out there, when you put it on a big screen, it actually had two little objects that came out of the bottom of it. But other than that, no windows, no seams, no nothing.
Landing gear.
Mr. Grusch, as a result of your previous government work, have you met with people with direct knowledge or have direct knowledge yourself of non-human origin craft?
Yes, I personally interviewed those individuals.
Mr. Grusch, as a result of your previous government work, have you met with people with direct knowledge or have direct knowledge yourself about ATs, advanced technologies that the U.S. government has?
Based on conventional advanced tech, I was briefed to the preponderance of the Defense Department's both space and aerospace department programs. Yeah.
Do you have knowledge or do you have reason to believe that there are programs in the advanced tech space that are unsanctioned?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And when you say that they're above congressional oversight, what do you mean?
Complicated question. So there's some, I would call it abuse here. So
good.
congressional oversight of conventional special access programs, and I'll use Title 10, so DoD as an example, right? So 10 U.S. Code Section 119 discusses congressional
remember
oversight SAPs, discusses the DepSecDef's ability to waive congressional reporting. However, the Gang of Eight is at least supposed to be notified if a waived or waive bigoted unacknowledged SAP is created, and that's public law.
Well, so then how does, I don't want to cut you off, but how does a program like that get funded?
Great question.
I will give you generalities. I can get very specific in a closed session, but misappropriation of funds and
Does that mean
self-funding.
does that mean that there is money in the budget that is set to go to a program, but it doesn't, and it goes to something else?
Yes, I have specific knowledge of that. Yep.
Do you think U.S. corporations are overcharging for certain tech they're selling to the U.S. government, and that additional money is going to programs?
Correct, through something called IRAD.
And one other key way of funding this that, there's a lot of empirical evidence they don't get into here, and he probably, I believe he would have to in a closed door because they asked about him later, is essentially illegal operations. These black operations, special access funds are coming through a lot of nefarious things. And we might have to do another episode or a very annual touch on this, but obviously there's notorious for the Iran-Contra incident, right? You know, drugs being sold through the CIA in South Central to fund the Iran-Nicaragua incident, or, you know, Contra and in Nicaragua. And we know, you know, so drugs, armed trade, and the most nefarious that's become more and more to light is human trafficking.
Yep.
So these illegal funds then are used to fund illegal programs within the special access, you know, unacknowledged special access programs. So once again, you have to understand, this is not just about purely saying UFOs are here and, you know, we're acknowledging the physics and their existence. It's also acknowledging a very insidious and dark and unconstitutional, immoral, unethical operation that has been going on a long time that is funded through illegal means. So anybody in that is clearly, you know, looking at jail time and, you know, concerned about, you know, as anybody would, doing something illegal.
Essentially what I hear from what you just mentioned and what I'm hearing from this hearing is the opening of the kimono, right? And so it's a subcommittee on national security, the border, and foreign affairs hearing, right? And so like to your point, I like that you brought that out. There's going to be a lot of people who heard about this subcommittee hearing thinking, oh my God, they're going to show like crafts and they're going to show bodies and things like that. And that's not what's happening. What's happening is this should just continue to allow for more questions to come up and for us to kind of go, wait, do we have a healthy amount of skepticism? We probably won't walk away from this podcast. We probably won't walk away from watching that hearing thinking definitively there are UAPs and UFOs and aliens. But we should by now see, oh, wait a minute. The government is doing a lot to suppress something for some reason.
Well, I mean, and he says it outright, as you've heard it in a couple of the statements, especially Grusch, that we do have actual craft and actual bodies and advanced technology. So I think, once again, if he's telling the truth and he's his entire job, he was tasked with looking at these programs, essentially auditing them, the special access programs, and had many, many people firsthand who were telling him this exact thing, that we do have craft and we do have bodies and that we have a broad retrieval program. And so once again, if what he's saying is true with evidence that he's provided in classified settings of visual evidence and documents to validate this, that he has to only show in what's called the SCIF, as we said, but he does have the evidence visually and the juicier stuff that I wish we could see more transparently currently in an open hearing, but has to be currently in a closed hearing. He has provided that to the Intelligence Inspector General, who's backed up what he said, saying this evidence is noteworthy and backs what he's saying. And I think that we're gonna have a little patience there, but it seems like the ball is moving in that direction more and more, and it can be declassified for us to see it in a more transparent way. But once again, he swore an oath, and he's saying we have craft and body, and I can prove it. So that alone, you know, you just got to, you know, if he's lying with a swearing an oath, then, you know, that's just the first big hurdle, I would say, you know, believing his personal testimony.
And imagine this. Imagine, before you, just quickly, just imagine being in their shoes, the shoes of those three that are sworn in, and also those few that are behind those three, right? We mentioned George Knapp and we mentioned Jeremy Corbell, right? Imagine being in a situation in which you, within your every fiber of your being, you witness something that you know is not normal, right? Like not within normal standards. And you've seen what's happened to your colleagues and how they've been suppressed and all these things. And you know, imagine having to walk through life dealing with your family, with your friends, knowing that if you don't put out this information, this could also affect not only your own career, but it could also affect your family, your family's family, the rest of the world. Like, I feel like these guys are heroes, really, like to put their neck on the line, their career on the line, their life on the line, to come out with this information, knowing that the bulk of people are going to think these guys are quacks. And this is probably why it's taken so long to get to this point. But I'm actually happy that this is happening. This is why I was so excited to do this show, because it's like, finally, we're getting to some truths. Finally.
Yeah. No, it's very, it gives a lot of I don't know. I think this is a moment too for people who have kind of been selling this to also show maturity and not be like, I told you so moments, it's to be like, look, like, well, I'm just glad you're being more open-minded. And it's very reassuring in a lot of ways. It's kind of a Copernicus Galileo moment, right? It really is. This is an ontological shock for the species. And that's what's the most important, and focusing on like how we can use this in positive ways moving forward. That's the key thing. But we're gonna have to have some purging first. So this is part of it. The shining the light. We're gonna uncover some darkness. But I always focus on the positive and what this means. It's just keep that in mind too, guys. Instead of leaning into the darkness and being like angry and resentful, become like optimistic and see how this will be such a game changer. What implications? So.
We have satellites all over the place, some that we're aware of and many that we're not aware of, right? We're taking pictures of everything at every point in a second. Mr. Grusch, are you aware, do you have direct knowledge, or we talk to people with direct knowledge, that there are satellite imagery of these events?
That was one of my primary tasks at NGA, since we process, exploit, and disseminate that kind of information. I've seen multiple cases, some of which, to my understanding, of course, I left NGA in April, so that's my information cutoff date. But I personally reviewed both what we call overhead collection and from other strategic and tactical platforms that were I could not even explain prosaically. And I have a degree in physics, by the way, as well. And I am aware that you guys have not seen these reports, unfortunately, and I don't know why.
Do you have direct knowledge, or you've spoken to people with direct knowledge, that this imagery applies to crash sites, crash imagery?
I can't discuss that in an open session.
Okay. Do you have any information that the U.S. government is involved in a disinformation campaign to deny the existence of certain UAPs?
I can't go beyond what I've already stated publicly in my News Nation interview, because it touches other sensitivities.
Can you give me the names and titles of the people with direct firsthand knowledge and access to some of these crash retrieval programs, and maybe which facilities, military bases that the recovered material would be in? And I know a lot of Congress have talked about we're going to go to Area 51, and I mean, there's nothing there anymore anyway. It's just and we move like a glacier as soon as we announce it. I'm sure the moving vans will pull up, but please.
I can't discuss that publicly, but I did provide that information both to the Intel committees and the Inspector General.
And we could get that in the SCIF if we were allowed to get in the SCIF with you. Would that be probably what you would think?
Sure, if you had the appropriate accesses, yeah.
What special access programs cover this information, and how is it possible that they have evaded oversight for so long?
I do know the names. Once again, I can't discuss that publicly and how they've evaded oversight. In a closed setting, I can tell you the specific tradecraft use.
All right. When do you think those programs began, and who authorized them?
I do know a lot of that information, but that's something I can't discuss publicly because that's
all right. If any of y'all want to jump in on any of this, you're more than welcome to. What level of security clearance is required to fully access these programs?
Tough crowd.
Well, anybody who has...
And I say that because myself, Representative Gates and Representative Luna were basically turned away at one point at Eglin, so please go right ahead.
Certainly a difference between member access and, say, somebody like me, but anybody who has a TSSCI clearance and meets the eligibility criteria, the access adjudicative authority should be able to grant you access.
Ms. Burchett, if you'll yield, so just to put a fine point on that, there's nothing that you're aware of that's above special access program classification.
It's a misnomer that there's anything actually above top secret. Executive Order 13526 delineates the classification levels.
Right, but I draw a point on that because we can have access to those programs, and so the notion that we're not being given that access sort of defies our typical muscle memory here in Congress. Thank you, Ms. Burchett. I'll yield back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Gates. Along those lines, Title 10, you may not know this or not, but Title 10 and Title 50 authorization, they seem to say they're inefficient. So who gets to decide this, in your opinion, in the past?
It's a group of career senior executive officials.
Okay, are they government officials?
Both in and out.
Do what?
Both in and out of government, and that's about as far as I
got
go
you.
there.
All right, well, that's
really
leads to my next question.
He's putting it very diplomatically, but essentially what he's describing is, a cabal. There's many terms for it, or, there's collusion of vested interests. And these are people who are basically defense contractors, very high ups, owners of high up positions, and very high up people within these, alphabet soup agencies, from all various departments of the DoD. He doesn't, obviously he'll tell you, and he names names essentially in a classified briefing, and he has that list, and he even has it down, as he says, to ones that are willing to speak and ones that are essentially malevolent, not willing to speak, and violent, part of the ones who are doing these reprisals against him and his actual personal safety of himself and his wife. So essentially, though, this is a real, there's been many terms for it throughout history: the military industrial complex, the deep state, whatever term you need to. And I know this has been something that's, been driven to the corners of conspiracy theories and stuff, but this is now something that we're getting, once again, congressional hearings of people saying there are powerful groups of individuals that are in these positions of the gatekeepers, essentially. We're not saying the entire people in all of the CIA or FBI or the Department of Defense or the Pentagon are bad. We're saying, just like you have, traitorous people during wartime, we have essentially traitorous people within our private sector and government who are colluding because they benefit from this, whether it's money, control, access to technology. You can see a lot of reasons why you'd want to have this. But unfortunately, they have justified and used the classification of national security to become rampant without oversight and unaccountable to the American people. And the more you look into the stuff, the pretty dark, as we said, it gets is the ways they fund this. And ultimately a mentality of they're not accountable to us, right? And they're okay with that. They don't think we should be. You can't handle the truth, and yeah, it's their role to protect us from this in a lot of ways. But yeah, essentially, we're calling their bluff. I mean, that's the point we're at, and it is a generic, as they say, cover up.
Which private corporations are directly involved in this program? How much taxpayer money has been invested in these programs, to your knowledge? I mean, we know we audit the Pentagon every year, and I've been here 5 years, and they fail the dadgum thing every year. They lose over $1 billion a year, we think, and I was told the Department of Defense maybe 60% of their assets are unaccounted for, whatever the heck that means. In the public sector, you go to jail for that kind of crap. So tell me.
Yeah, I know when I'm $1 off of my DTS travel voucher, I get hammered, but it seems like it doesn't work the other way.
If you sell over $600 worth of stuff on eBay now, you get a call from the IRS. So please, what corporations?
Yeah, I don't know the specific metrics towards the end of your question. The specific corporations I did provide to the committees in specific divisions, and I spent 11 and a half hours with both Intel committees. So.
Okay, has there been an active U.S. government disinformation campaign to deny the existence of unidentified aerial phenomena? And if so, why?
I can't go beyond what I've already espoused publicly about that.
I like that you hear them whispering.
I know, I hear them whispering.
Ask him if he likes me. Ask him if he likes me, Jack.
Yeah.
Okay, I've been told to ask you what that is and how to get it in the record.
Which
What have you stated publicly in your interviews for the congressional record?
if you reference my News Nation interview and I talk about a multi-decade, campaign to disenfranchise public interest, basically. Yeah.
I apologize, Mr. Chairman. I yield back negative 21 seconds.
Thank you. Ms. Ocasio-Cortez?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for coming here today. I do concur with the ranking member as well as several other members here on this committee that this is a committee for whistleblowers and for the protection of whistleblowers as well. So we understand what you're putting on the table here and what you're putting on the line here, and we thank you for that. Mr. Grusch, you sat on the Unidentified Anomalous Phenomenon Task Force created in the 2020 NDAA, correct?
Yes.
There have been some things that have been mentioned here during this hearing that I wanted to pick up on. Mr. Graves, you mentioned specifically during the answer to one of your questions, you named Boeing contractors being engaged in an incident regarding this red cube about a football field. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about the interaction, or Mr. Grusch, either of you, the interactions between defense contractor companies and any UAP-related programs or activities.
So I'll just say that the information about the contractors themselves were provided by a witness, and I have no particular detail in that relationship.
Mr. Grusch?
The kind of general unclass wave tops, certainly the contractors, are the metal benders, so to speak, the ones actually doing specific performance on government contracts.
Are they required to issue any disclosure regarding UAP sightings, or do they engage in any reporting around this?
In terms of the contractors?
Yes.
Not that I'm aware of.
They do not. Okay. Now, when it comes to notification that you had mentioned about IRAP programs, we have seen defense contractors abuse their contract before through this committee. I have seen it personally, and I have also seen the notification requirements to Congress abused. I am wondering, one of the loopholes that we see in the law is that there is, at least from my vantage point, is that depending on what we're seeing, is that there are no actual definitions or requirements for notification. What methods of notification did you observe? Like when they say they notified Congress, how did they do that? Do you have insight into that?
For certain IRAD activities, I can only think of ones conventional in nature. Sometimes they flow through certain, I would say, SAP programs that have cognizant authority over the Air Force or something, and those are congressionally reported compartments, but IRAD is literally internal to the contractor, so as long as it's money, either profits, private investment, etc., they can do whatever they want.
To put a finer point on it, when there's a requirement for any agency or company to notify Congress, do they contact the chairman of a committee? Do they get them on the phone specifically? Is this through an email to hypothetically a dead email box?
A lot of it comes through what they call the PPR, Periodic Program Review Process, if it's a SAP or Controlled Access Program Equity, and then those go to the specific committees, whether it be the SAS, CASC, ISI.
Thank you. I apologize. My time is limited. Mr. Graves, one of your main concerns is that the FAA currently does not have an official process to receive reports of UAP from pilots or others, correct?
Correct.
And in your experience, what data should the AERO program prioritize for potential collection? We have, location, date, time, but are there other specific characteristics that should be included in these reports?
Certainly. I think that there's two categories that would be important. One would be kinematics and understanding the specifics of how the vehicle or objects are moving. And the second would be a more zoomed out approach of being able to look at origin and destination after or before the incident, as well as getting a better contextual understanding of how these objects are interacting with each other.
Thank you. Now, because I only have a minute left, I apologize, we only have 5 minutes today, but for the record, if you were me, where would you look? Titles, programs, departments, regions, if you could just name anything. And I put that as an open question to the three of you.
Name names.
I'd be happy to give you that in a closed environment.
Ah,
if those
there
specific-
you go.
Thank you.
Exactly.
Commander Fravor?
I would say, and I've told people, you have to know where to look. They're not going to divulge it to you because of classification levels. But if you know where to look and who to talk to, which is exactly where Mr. Grusch can point you, then you have them.
Okay. Mr. Hayes?
I was an operator, so I was depending on folks like Mr. Grusch to do that homework.
Okay.
I can give you a specific cooperative and hostile witness list of specific individuals that were in those.
And how soon can we get that list?
I'm happy to provide that to you after the hearing.
Thank you very much.
So as you can see, this is all pointing towards, clearly, like I said, they're gonna have more hearings, closed hearings with Grusch. That's important. But the good news is that he can name names, and Grusch does have, like I said, he does have the access, the evidence, and he has already done 11 hours with both intel committees doing this, essentially. So that's the good news. And look, sounds like all these senators who are, they're going to do it, you know, from...
Well, as long as he doesn't go missing,
dude,
or get
I
sick
know.
all of a sudden, or, you
Trust
know.
me. I'm like, I was wondering if he was going to make it to this hearing. I'm like, I wonder if he's been like in some like secure facility up to this point, and he hasn't done any interviews except that initial exclusive interview with News Nation. But this gives him a lot of credibility, and will continue to. But he's like Epstein, bro. He can name names. I mean, he's somebody who has actually talked to these people, but has, you know, he's obviously a white hat and a good person. And they ask him at the end, we'll show a clip of his closing statement, why he did this. But ultimately, you know, he's truly, in the best sense of the word, a patriot. He does this because he feels a civic justice and duty to the American people.
Yeah, let's go to that. Let's go to that point now. Let's go to the closing statements.
Several months ago, my office received a protected disclosure from Eglin Air Force Base indicating that there was a UAP incident that required my attention. I sought a briefing regarding that episode and brought with me Congressman Burchett and Congresswoman Luna. We asked to see any of the evidence that had been taken by flight crew in this endeavor and to observe any radar signature as well as to meet with the flight crew. We were not afforded access to all of the flight crew. And initially, we were not afforded access to images and to radar. Thereafter, we had a bit of a discussion about how authorities flow in the United States of America, and we did see the image. And we did meet with one member of the flight crew who took the image. The image was of something that I am not able to attach to any human capability, either from the United States or from any of our adversaries. And I'm somewhat informed on the matter, having served on the Armed Services Committee for 7 years, having served on the committee that oversees DARPA and advanced technologies for several years. When we spoke with the flight crew, and when he showed us the photo that he'd taken, I asked why the video wasn't engaged, why we didn't have a FLIR system that worked. Here's what he said. They were out on a test mission that day over the Gulf of Mexico. And when you're on a test mission, you're supposed to have clear airspace. Not supposed to be anything that shows up. And they saw a sequence of 4 craft in a clear diamond formation for which there is a radar sequence that I alone have observed in the United States Congress. One of the pilots goes to check out that diamond formation and sees a large floating, what I can only describe as an orb. Again, like I said, not of any human capability that I'm aware of. And when he approached, he said that his radar went down. He said that his FLIR system malfunctioned and that he had to manually take this image from one of the lenses, and it was not automated in collection as you would typically see in a test mission. So I guess I'll start with Commander Fravor. How should we think about the fact that this craft that was approached by our pilot had the capability of disarming a number of the sensor and collection systems on that craft?
Well, I think this goes to that national security side. You can go back through history of things showing up at certain areas and disabling our capabilities, which is disheartening. And for us, I mean, like I said, it completely disabled the radar on the aircraft when it tried to do it. And the only way we could see it is passively, which is how he got that image. So I think that's a concern on what are these doing, not only how do they operate, but their capabilities inside to do things like this.
And how should we think about 4 craft moving in a very clear formation, equidistant from one another, in a diamond? In all of the phenomenon, perhaps, Mr. Grave, that you've analyzed, have we ever seen multiple craft in a single formation?
I have one particular case, and that was during the gimbal incident. The recording on the AT FLIR system shows a single object that rotates. You hear the pilots refer to a fleet of objects that is not visible on the FLIR system, and that was something that I witnessed during the debrief as part of the radar data on the situational awareness page. I would like to add, however, Congressman, there's a small bit of anger, I would say I would feel that those pilots are still facing that difficulty in reporting this topic, and they don't have the tools to be able to mitigate this issue. It just goes to show how serious this is and why this is such an important issue for our pilots and for our nation.
It was stated explicitly to me by these test pilots that if you have a UAP experience, the best thing you can do for your career is forget it and not tell anyone. Because any type of reporting, either above the surface or below the surface, does have a perceived consequence to these people, and that is a culture we must change if we want to get to the truth. Mr. Chairman, I would observe that perhaps as we move forward from this hearing, there are some obvious next steps. Every person watching this knows that we need to meet with Mr. Grusch in a secure, compartmentalized facility so that we can get fulsome answers that do not put him in jeopardy and that give us the information we need. Second, I would suggest that the radar images that were collected of this formation of craft out of Eglin Air Force Base, and specifically the actual image taken by the actual flight crew that we can actually validate, be provided to the committee, subpoenaed if necessary, so that we're able to track how to get this type of reporting and analysis done in a more fulsome way. That would be my recommendation, humbly, as a guest here of the Fine Oversight.
Do you believe there's an active disinformation campaign within our government to deny existence of UAPs? Yes or no?
I don't have an answer to that.
As previously stated publicly, yes.
I think previously with like Project Blue Book, yes, but currently I don't speak for the United States government.
I have a few questions for Mr. Graves. What percentage of UAP sightings in your belief go unreported by our pilots?
This is an approximation based off of my personal experience speaking with a number of pilots, but I would estimate we're somewhere near 5% reporting perhaps.
So like 95% basically don't report seeing UAPs?
That's just my personal estimate.
Mr. Fravor, as an expert naval aviator, have you ever seen an object that looked and moved like the Tic Tac UAP?
No.
Did the Tic Tac UAP move in such a way that defied the laws of physics?
The way we understand them, yes.
Many dismiss UAP reports as classified weapons testing by our own government, but in your experience as a pilot, does our government typically test advanced weapon systems right next to multi-million-dollar jets without informing our pilots?
No, we have test ranges for that.
Do you believe that officials at the highest levels of our national security apparatus have unlawfully withheld information from Congress and subverted our oversight authority?
There are certain elected leaders that had more information that I'm not sure what they've shared with certain Gang of Eight members or et cetera, but certainly I would not be surprised.
Okay. You've stated that the government is in possession of potentially non-human spacecraft. Based on your experience and extensive conversations with experts, do you believe our government has made contact with intelligent extraterrestrials?
Something I can't discuss in public setting.
Okay, I can't ask when you think this occurred. If you believe we have crashed craft, stated earlier, do we have the bodies of the pilots who piloted this craft?
As I've stated publicly already in my News Nation interview, biologics came with some of these recoveries, yeah.
Were they, I guess, human or non-human biologics?
Non-human, and that was the assessment of people with direct knowledge on the program I talked to that are currently still in the program.
And was this documentary evidence, this video, photos, eyewitness? Like, how would that be determined?
The specific documentation I would have to talk to you in a SCIF about.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Are you aware of any individuals that are participating in reverse engineering programs for non-terrestrial craft?
Personally, yes.
Do you know any that would be willing to testify if there were protections for them?
Certainly closed door and assurances that breaking their NDA, they're not going to get administratively punished for so. Yeah.
Mr. Grusch, why is it that you refer to the phenomenon as non-human intelligence? Why deviate from the basis of extraterrestrial life?
I think the phenomenon is very complex, and I like to leave an open mind analytically to specific origin.
When you say specific origin, are you referring, can you elaborate on that for those that might not?
If it's a traditional extraterrestrial origin or something else that we don't quite understand from either biological or astrophysics perspective, yeah, just like to keep an open mind on what it could be, yeah.
Okay, and referring to your News Nation interview, you had referenced specific treaties between governments. Article 3 of the Nuclear Arms Treaty with Russia identifies UAPs. It specifically mentions them. To your knowledge, are there safety measures in place with foreign governments or other superpowers to avoid an escalatory situation in the event that a UAP malevolent event occurs?
Yeah, you're referring to actual public treaty in the UN Register. It's funny you mentioned that. Yeah, the Agreement on Measures to Reduce the Risk of Outbreak of Nuclear War signed in 1971. Unclassified treaty publicly available. And if you cite the George Washington University National Security Archives, you will find the declassified in 2013 specific provisions in the specific red line flash message traffic with the specific codes pursuant to Article 3 and Article, also Situation 2, which is in the previously classified NSA archive. What I would recommend, and I tried to get access, but I got a wall of silence at the White House, was those specific incidents when those message traffic was used. I think some scholarship on that would open the door to a further investigation using those publicly available information.
Thank you. And then my last question with 51 seconds remaining. You mentioned white-collar crimes potentially being taking place in regards to a cover-up. Can you please elaborate?
I have concerns based on the interviews I conducted under my official duties of potential violations of the federal acquisition regulations, the FAR.
You've been able to answer in great detail on certain questions, and then other things you say you're not able to respond to. Can you just explain where you're drawing the line and what's the basis for that?
Yeah, based on my JobSer security review and what they've determined that is unclassified.
I see. So you're answering any questions that just call upon your knowledge of unclassified questions, but anything that relates to classified matters you're not commenting on in this context.
In an open session, but happy to participate in a closed session at the right level, yeah.
Why did you come forward on this issue?
I came forward because I felt that my colleagues did not have a way to mitigate the safety threat, and I wanted to help them. I was trained as an aviation safety officer by the Navy, and this seemed, it just felt right. I felt like I had to help the folks that were still flying and dealing with this.
Mr. Grusch?
Purely a sense of duty. My first sworn oath when I was a cadet 18 years ago, and I still uphold that even out of the uniform.
Commander?
I was pestered by a friend, and I asked why, and he said, "You're the one person that they can't discredit, and you'll add credibility to the New York Times article." And so after about 6 times, I said, "Okay."
Yeah. This town isn't made, unfortunately, by people like y'all. We thank y'all. And I do want to also thank the people in the audience and the people that are watching this that can't be, people all over the world that have kept this issue alive. You've endured criticism and derogatory remarks, and we're trying to get to the bottom of it. And so God bless y'all. Thank y'all so much. We really appreciate you guys and gals. How can the public contribute to UAP reporting, and what avenues you think are available to the public to report these sightings?
Well, right now, I don't think there is a lot of public options for every man to be able to report on this. I think even for professionals that have sensor data that are seeing these on a regular basis, they're still hesitant to come forward. And so for the general public, I think encouraging the conversations that we're having today, looking for technology solutions that can be distributed so that objective data can be gathered is the first place to go.
Mr. Grusch?
I'll just touch on the whistleblower side of it. I do encourage, current and former military, intelligence community, and industry contractors to come forward in a legal way, either through the IC or DoD or whatever the cognizant IGs are, to lead, join me in this discussion.
For me, I was an accident investigator, so the biggest thing that you learn, and I think that witnesses need to do is, one, don't try and make the fish bigger than it was. Stick to the facts. Write it down, and don't speculate what you think it is because it will sway your decision. Just write the facts down. We can get all the facts together, and we can start to investigate and get a real honest story instead of it was this big.
Thank you all, and I want to thank everybody. We made history today.
We will continue to monitor this, and I definitely will ask you guys to refer to episode 141. Maybe you can put that in the description so people can go and so you can kind of see a fun, lighter side to this. Also, refer back to Gordon's story, and maybe we can do an episode where you expand upon your time in discovering all of that stuff that you did. And I just think that we should just have a more open mind to all of this because, again, nothing was super definitive besides the fact that we now know that a number of things have been pushed to the side. We've been shielded from a lot of things that goes beyond national security. I think this is more in line with like our livelihood. We've all heard of the balloon that was shot down, but like when I see this subcommittee hearing, I think, well, was that really just a balloon? Right? And it's like what else is going on that we don't know about, or that they know about but we don't? And I'm not saying that we need to know everything because of quite frankly, we can't handle the truth sometimes, right? I get it. But at least now we should be doing what you and I are doing, Gordon, which is talking with each other, doing what you and your family did. Someone sat down and said, okay, let's talk about aliens, right? Why not, right? That should not be so taboo anymore because there's some real evidence that there are crafts, there are bodies, and there's information being hidden from us. That's what we know. Yeah, and to kind of putting it all in a bow, and we'll play the clips that you guys will see throughout this. Part of this is obviously the ridicule factor or the feeling of self-censorship that comes from people who do have experiences, especially in the Air Force and Navy and military pilots, and helping to destigmatize is the term they use,
because that is a critical part of this. Tying it up here, this is the beginning of conversation, but it's a very strong, I think, important first step where a lot of key things were put into the record, especially from David Grusch and what he has asserted. And I think what's going to occur now is all of these senators and representatives will meet with Grusch in a secure facility, get it way more informed, see more hardcore evidence that obviously we all are dying to see and would like to see as well, but then get even more convinced so that the next hearings and moving forward with legislation will hopefully really have some teeth to them, and they'll be coming from a place of we know exactly this is for real and everything he's asserted is correct. Yeah, man, I'm excited and down to keeping an eye on this and following this stuff. I obviously am passionate about it and I think it's critical on a lot of fronts. Once again, really see the positive, optimistic side to all this. I think a lot of senators have already said it, and I truly believe this, but I do think we live in a big universe. There's obviously probably some nasty, mean ones out there. There's probably some that are neutral, but I also think there's plenty of very benevolent ones that clearly have some sort of vested interest in us, because ultimately, if the most evil one that would come and just take us all over in any dystopian sci-fi movie about this, it would have already happened. Clearly, they have the ability to, with the technology, to disarm and do major things, as they said. Now, some of the other skeptics qualify here. I know some people say that they are some benevolent ones here already, and they're working more insidiously in weird ways. Possibly. Ultimately, we're at a weird precipice point on a lot of fronts then. As our own as our own species, but also as we play this out with other species that are advanced. Walking the talk and maintaining these principles of what we talk about and what we hold high will only benefit us in any scenario, whatever it is. Now is an important time to really embrace them, because it's going to be tested, so to speak.
That's right. Well, if you resonated with this episode and you want to sort of challenge the thoughts and ideas and principles of your peers, your family, your friends, your loved ones, then feel free to share this with them to bring about other conversations and just to kind of see what other people are thinking. Because I find that I tend to gravitate towards those who are a bit more open-minded, because it just allows for a greater experience in life, I think. Like, I want to be able to talk to people about aliens and have a laugh and, smoke a J or, take some mushrooms or whatever, right? Or none of that. But to be able to have different thoughts and ideas is what we're all about. And this is why we're kind of gravitating towards this path in the show, which is trying to bring up more thoughts of what's happening behind the scenes and then bringing that to the forefront on this show platform. So there you have it.
Definitely. Well, I'm here for it, man.
Love it. All right. This is Josh signing out. Simply Walk the Talk. Thanks for your chat, Gordon. And until next time, peace.
Simply walk the talk. Walk the talk, talking facts. Move like me, but I move a little fast. Make my move, here to last. Fasten these seatbelts, I'm coming past. Take care of me, longevity. Hack my biology, better believe. Walking the talk, soul, mind, and body connected. Better come give us a listen.